Welcome back for this second video of the series of Microsoft Endpoint Manager focused on Configuration Manager. So if you haven't missed the first video, just go back and have a look what we are talking about, what we are going to be talking about on this series. If this is the second video, welcome back. And in any case, if you haven't subscribed already, just click on the subscribe and don't forget to click that little bell icon so you're going to be notified every time we upload a new content. So last video, we talked about what we are going to be talking on this series. And in this video, we are going to talk about the first pre-requirement for Configuration Manager, that is SQL Server. So when we talk about SQL Server, it's not just a simple next, finish. We know that SQL is a lot more complex than just a database in backend. So for Configuration Manager, it's a lot more complex because we cannot just touch the database. So normally DBAs like to change stuff, and in this case we cannot, because if we touch the database, what's going to happen is it's not going to be supported by Microsoft. So in terms of support, before we actually even think about installing Configuration Manager, we need to think about installing SQL. But not just installing SQL, it's, like I said, SQL for Configuration Manager. And because it's SQL for Configuration Manager, there are some requirements that we need to look in terms of Configuration Manager. And here on the documentation page for supported SQL versions, we can see that Configuration Manager supports 2019, 2017, 16, 2014 as well. And you can see here that 2012 is still on the page, but is no longer supported. The support for Configuration Manager to have the SQL 2012 has been deprecated because the life cycle, the whole support for 2012 will end in July 2022. In your case here, we will look at 2019, and you can see here 2019 we can use in standard or enterprise. And we need a minimum of cumulative update 5. Because this is a new installation, we will go to the latest version of configuration of SQL. So we will install the cumulative update 15. Now, not just the SQL, we are going to just the number 5, the 5, and we will install every single other. So the latest one, that's 15. And we can have the option to standard and enterprise. So for Configuration Manager, if you're going to have more than 150,000 devices, you need to go to enterprise because it will require a CAS. We will not talk about CAS at the moment, but just look at the number of devices you're going to have. If you're going to have less than 150, now you can use standard. In our case here, I'm going to install standard. Also, there is licensing implication for standard and enterprise. The standard version is actually built in for Configuration Manager if you use the SQL Server only for Configuration Manager. But there is a caveat on that. So if you will look at the FAQ for Configuration Manager licensing, if you scroll down almost all the way to the bottom here, we can see what's the rights for the SQL Server. And we can use the SQL Server standard version for free if you use it for Configuration Manager database, if you use it for WSUS, if the WSUS is used for Configuration Manager only. We can use it for SQL reporting services, again, if it's only used for Configuration Manager. We can use it for data warehousing and any database replicas for the management points. We will see what management point is in the future. But if you create your own database, you need to pay the license for that. If you use that SQL for another software, you need to pay license for that. And if you use the enterprise, you need to pay the license as well. But in any case, I'm not a licensing specialist. I would suggest you to talk to a licensing specialist if you want to deploy the Configuration Manager in production. Also, when we talk about installing SQL, we need to see what the size, how much disk space we need. Is going to be on the same server, is going to be in a remote server, all those kind of stuff. So Microsoft gave you a recommendation performance guidelines for the server. And if you scroll down on that page, you can have general sizing guidelines. So for the configuration manager with up to 25,000 clients, with the configuration manager and SQL on the same box, we will need a 6 core and a 24 gig of RAM. If the SQL server is in another box, the SQL Server box will need 4 cores and 16 gig of RAM. Then again, we have 50,000, we have 100,000, and you have 150, and then over 150, that would be the maximum we can have is the 700,000 devices. And of course, if we are looking at secondary sites, there is some guidance as well. But this is a lot. How do I going to remember all those numbers if I'm just doing a small deployment? So the minimum is 25. Below that is also possible to use, but it's going to be slow and maybe not supported by Microsoft. So if you are thinking, okay, I have 27,000 or I have 30,000. So I have created a spreadsheet that is available here on my GitHub. GitHub/.raphael/tools, and you can see here that SCCM size calculator. And I already open here this spreadsheet, and you can see here just the yellow part is where I need to change. So let's say I'm going to do a deployment of 45,000 devices. I assume I use around 5 megabytes per client, but could be something between 5 and 8 depending on the inventory that we are going to look at this later on. And it's going to be a primary site. You can see here that I will need about 24 gig of RAM. And using version 2019, and it's not going to be a local installation, it's going to be remote. But if it's going to be on the same box, you can see here that is now I need a 32 gig. So it's quite simple to see how much memory is going to be required for the server. And here also tells about memory required for the SQL itself. So in this case, I will leave no because it's going to be another. And here, if it's the WSUS is going to be on the same box and on the same SQL, or using going to be a remote box, or is going to be using Windows internal database. And here it tells how much disk space we are going to be need in terms of configuration manager, TapeDB, WSUS, other databases, and also a special database I use for the CM monitor. But in total, if I'm going to use 45,000 devices, you can see here I will need around 594 gig of disk space. That's a lot. So in your case here, let's say I'm going to be supporting 25,000. You can see here now I just need 319. How many files as well? It depends on the number of cores. So this is all customizable, and you don't need to how many files, what is size, and so on and so forth. And available for you to download on my GitHub. And when we are installing SQL, SQL has its own pre-requirements, of course, but also SQL has its own security. And when we talk about security, what we need is service accounts. So as more accounts we have, more secure it will be. You could use all the computer itself account or a system, one account or multiple accounts. And here actually explains what the services that are being installed and what accounts we can use. And here, if we scroll down a little bit more, you can see here there are a few accounts for database engines and all the permissions we need. So we have talked about SQL a lot. Requirements of the SQL in terms of configuration manager, disk space. So we have we saw some documentation, as well as we have seen the spreadsheet I have created. So all the links will be in the description below anyway, if you need access those. But that's it for this video, because I don't want to give you guys a lot. It's just over 10 minutes. If you still have time, just don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. And of course, follow me on the social networks. And if you have any queries, comments, just leave those on the comments below. Thank you very much, and I see you on the next video.